The war had lasted 6 months, and humanity was losing badly. Every colony outside the Sol system had fallen to the celestial warlords, those 7 alien princes who commanded fleets that could shatter planets. Their ships moved like silver ghosts through space, their weapons turned cities to glass, and their warriors stood 3 meters tall with skin that shimmered like starlight. They had conquered 40% of known space over 3 centuries, and they had never lost a war. Admiral sat in the command center beneath Geneva, staring at the holographic display that showed Earth's dwindling defenses. Red markers indicated enemy fleets. There were so many red markers. The warlords had dismissed humanity as primitive, calling their weapons crude and their tactics barbaric. They were probably right. Human and missiles seemed like toys compared to energy beams that could cut through a kilometer of solid steel. But had found something. A captured warlord frigate had yielded its data cores before the crew could destroy them. The intelligence officers had spent weeks decrypting the alien systems, and what they found changed everything. The celestial warlords ran their entire military from a single location, a mobile fortress called the Nexus Prime, the size of Earth's moon, that traveled at the center of their largest fleet. Inside that fortress sat the 7 warlord princes and something called the Celestial Beacon. The beacon was how they coordinated their forces across light years instantly, their psychic network that made their fleets move as one. Captain Sarah stood beside, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She had seen the data too. She knew what was thinking before he said it. "It's impossible," she said quietly. "Everything about this war is impossible," replied. "They have technology centuries beyond ours. They have shields we can't penetrate and weapons we can't defend against. By every logical measure, we should have surrendered already. But we're still here. Because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten," smiled without humor. "Or maybe we're just crazy enough to try things no sane species would consider." Leaned forward, studying the schematics of the Nexus Prime. The fortress was massive, a construct of impossible architecture with corridors that twisted through dimensions humans barely understood. It was protected by thousands of ships and defensive fields that could bend reality itself. No species had ever breached even its outer walls. "You want to infiltrate," it said, "not a question. I want you to infiltrate it, take a small team, get inside, kill the princes or capture them, cut off the head and maybe the body dies. Or maybe the body tears us apart in rage. Maybe, but right now we're dying anyway. At least this way we die trying something they'd never expect." Was quiet for a long moment. She had fought in the Mars independence conflicts before the warlords arrived, back when humanity's biggest problem was fighting itself. She knew urban warfare, zero-gravity combat, and how to survive when everything went wrong. She also knew when someone was asking her to walk into hell. "I'll need my own people," she said finally. 12 operators, all volunteers. We do this my way." Nodded. "Anything you need." 3 weeks later, stood in the briefing room with her team. 12 men and women, the best special operations soldiers Earth had produced. They had trained together, studying every scrap of data about the Nexus Prime, learning the warlord language, practicing with captured alien weapons that burned their hands even through gloves. She had divided them into 3 teams. Ghost Team would handle infiltration and reconnaissance. 4 operators trained to move through enemy territory without being seen. Havoc Team consisted of 4 heavy assault specialists, soldiers who could fight their way through anything. Oracle Team had 3 cyber warfare experts who could hack alien systems, though none of them really understood how warlord technology worked. "The Nexus Prime is every 48 hours, explained, pulling up a hologram of the fortress. "Supply ships from conquered worlds bring tribute, resources, and equipment. We captured one of those ships 2 days ago. We've modified it to spoof their identification codes and hidden compartments in the cargo containers." "They'll scan us," said Tors from Ghost Team. "Their sensors can detect a heartbeat from 1,000 kilometers away." Their sensors detect psychic signatures. They use telepathy to coordinate their forces, and every species they've conquered has some level of psychic ability. Humans don't. We're invisible to their primary detection method because we don't register on it at all. To them, we're ghosts. The room was silent as that sank in. Humanity's biggest disadvantage, their lack of psychic ability, had suddenly become their greatest advantage. "What about physical sensors?" asked Park from Oracle team. "Heat signatures, motion detectors." "We've developed thermal suits that mask our body heat, and will be hiding in stasis containers marked as biological samples. The warlords are arrogant. They don't carefully inspect tribute from conquered worlds because they've never had a reason to worry." Pulled up the next image, a detailed map of the Nexus Prime's interior. Once we're inside, we split up. Ghost Team locates the Warlord Princes. Havoc Team plants charges on critical systems, life support, power distribution, weapons arrays. Oracle Team reaches the Celestial Beacon and finds a way to shut it down or turn it against them. "And if we get caught?" someone asked. Met their eyes, each one in turn. "Then we make them pay for every meter. We make them remember that humans don't surrender quietly." The captured supply ship approached the Nexus Prime 3 days later. Lay cramped in a cargo container, her suit's display showing the external cameras. The fortress filled a structure that shouldn't exist, all flowing curves and angles that hurt to look at directly. It glowed with inner light, and around it orbited thousands of warlord ships, each one capable of destroying a city. Approaching Docking Port 7, the ship's automated systems announced in the clicking, musical language of the warlords, had programmed the responses herself, copying the patterns from captured communications. The massive hangar bay doors opened, revealing a space large enough to hold Earth's largest cities. Ships of every design floated inside, some from species had never seen before. All of them were tribute, all of them conquered. Their ship settled onto a landing platform, heard the clamps engage, felt the slight shudder as the external systems connected. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her breathing stayed calm. Years of training took over, pushing down the fear. "Ghost Team, sound off," she whispered into her comm. "Tor's ready. Jackson ready. Way ready." One by one, each team member confirmed they were in position. 12 humans, packed into cargo containers, about to infiltrate the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. The external doors opened. Heard the sound of the warlords, their voices like crystal chimes. She watched through her suit's exterior sensor as one of them approached her container. 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that reflected light like a prism. Beautiful and terrifying. The warlord's scanner swept over the container, held her breath. The device showed biological samples preserved in stasis, nothing of interest. The warlord moved on. Hours passed. The cargo bay slowly emptied as automated systems moved containers to various parts of the fortress. Finally, the container was lifted by an anti-gravity field and floated through a series of corridors. She tracked their movement on her internal map, watching as they penetrated deeper into the Nexus Prime. When the container finally came to rest in some storage facility, waited another 30 minutes. Then she activated the release mechanism she had installed, and the container door swung silently open. She was inside. They all were, scattered throughout the fortress in different storage facilities. Against every logical probability, they had penetrated the warlord's command center. Activated her comm. "All teams status report." Ghost Team were in. Section 47, maintenance level. Havoc Team in position. Section 12, power distribution. Oracle Team were here. Section 93, near the central spire. Allowed herself a small smile. "Begin operations. Radio silence unless emergency. Good hunting." She stepped out of the container into a corridor that curved upward in impossible ways. The walls glowed with soft light, and the air smelled like ozone and something sweet she couldn't identify. Somewhere in this fortress were 7 alien princes who thought themselves invincible. They were about to learn that humans specialized in the impossible. Checked her weapons, adjusted her thermal suit, and disappeared into the shadows. Behind her, 11 other humans did the same, spreading through the Nexus Prime like a virus in the bloodstream of a giant. Then the first alarm began to sound. A patrol drone had detected something in Section 47. Not a psychic signature, which would have been normal. Something else. A chemical trace, organic compounds that didn't match any species currently aboard the Nexus Prime. The drone's limited intelligence flagged it as an anomaly and reported it to Central Security. The Warlord security chief, a towering figure named X, studied the report with his primary eyes while his secondary eyes watched the security feeds. An anomaly, probably contamination from one of the tribute shipments, some spice or chemical from a conquered world. Still, protocol demanded investigation. He dispatched a security team to Section 47 with orders to identify and sterilize the source. The Nexus Prime was perfection, and perfection tolerated no impurities. In Section 47, Tors saw the security team coming. 6 warlords, armed with plasma rifles, moving down the corridor with the confidence of soldiers who had never faced a real threat. She pressed herself against the ceiling, using the maintenance shaft where the artificial gravity was weakest, and held completely still. The warlords passed beneath her, their scanner sweeping the corridor. They found nothing because they weren't looking up. Species that relied on psychic senses didn't develop strong tactical instincts. They didn't need to check corners or watch their backs when they could sense mines from hundreds of meters away. But they couldn't sense Tors. To them, she didn't exist. One of the warlords stopped, his scanner showing elevated readings from a ventilation grate. He gestured to another, and they began opening the grate, plasma rifles ready. Tors moved. She dropped from the ceiling, her combat knife already in her hand, and drove it up through the gap in the warlord's neck armor. Alien blood, silver and glowing, sprayed across the corridor. The warlord gurgled and fell. The others spun, weapons rising, but Tors was already moving. She had studied their physiology, knew where the organs clustered. A second knife throw took another in what passed for a kidney. Then she was rolling, pulling her sidearm, firing suppressed rounds into the joints of their armor. The fight lasted 8 seconds. 6 warlord security officers lay dead or dying, and Tors stood among them, breathing hard, covered in silver blood. "Ghost 1 to all teams," she whispered. "They know we're here," going loud in 3, 2, 1. Throughout the Nexus Prime, alarms began to wail. The fortress went into lockdown, blast doors sealing sections, gravity fields fluctuating. X stared at his security feeds in disbelief. 6 of his officers dead, but the scanners showed nothing. No psychic signatures, no registered life forms. How could his people be dead if nothing was there to kill them? The answer came a moment later when one of the security cameras caught a glimpse of Tors as she disappeared into a maintenance shaft. A bipedal creature, small, wearing some kind of suit. X didn't recognize the species. He quickly searched the database of conquered races. Nothing matched. Then a junior officer spoke up, his voice trembling. "Commander, I believe those are humans. The species from the Sol system, the ones we're currently at war with." X felt something cold settle in his stomach. Humans, the primitive species that barely had faster-than-light travel, here, inside the Nexus Prime. "That's impossible," he said, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't. He had dismissed humans as beneath concern just as the warlord princes had. They all had. Perhaps that had been a mistake. "Lock down the fortress," X ordered. "Deploy all security teams, find them, kill them, every single one." Throughout the Nexus Prime, thousands of warlord soldiers began to mobilize. They were the most advanced military force in the galaxy, equipped with weapons that could disintegrate matter and armor that could withstand starship weapons. Against them stood 12 humans with primitive guns and knives, trapped inside a fortress with no way out. By every logical measure, the humans should have died in the next 10 minutes. But humans had stopped caring about logic the moment they decided to infiltrate the Nexus Prime. Now they were going to teach the Celestial Warlords what it meant to fight an enemy that refused to play by the rules. The real battle was about to begin. The maintenance corridors of the Nexus Prime were never designed for combat. They twisted through the fortress in impossible geometries, spaces where the artificial gravity pulled in 3 directions at once, where the walls hummed with energy conduits that could fry an unshielded person in seconds. The corridors were too small for the 3-meter-tall warlords, designed only for repair drones and automated systems. For humans, they were perfect. Ghost Team moved through these spaces like water flowing downhill, following the path of least resistance. Tors led the way, her suit's sensors mapping their route while Jackson covered the rear. The warlords couldn't follow them here, couldn't even see into these cramped passages. Every few hundred meters, they emerged into larger corridors, sprinted across, and disappeared again before security teams could respond. "They're sealing sections ahead of us," Wei reported, watching the security grid on her handheld display. Oracle Team had already begun their work, feeding Ghost Team real-time updates on warlord movements. "They're trying to box us in." "Let them try," Tors said. She pulled a small device from her pack, something the engineering teams back on Earth had thrown together from salvaged warlord technology. It looked like it might explode at any moment, but the techs had promised it would short-circuit energy barriers. Probably. She slapped it against the blast door blocking their path. The device hummed, sparked, and the door's surface rippled like water. Tors kicked it, and a section fell away, the energy field collapsed. They were through before the warlord security systems even registered the breach. On the other side, they found themselves in some kind of garden. Trees with silver leaves grew toward a ceiling that showed stars, though they were clearly still inside the fortress. A stream of liquid light flowed through channels in the floor. It was beautiful and alien and completely disorienting. "Command Garden," Jackson said, checking his intelligence briefing. "Reserved for high-ranking officers. We're getting close to the central spire." Tors nodded. They had one objective now: find the warlord princes. Everything else was secondary. Behind them, warlord security teams finally breached the maintenance corridors, their armor scraping against the tight walls. But they were too big, too slow in the confined spaces. Every time they got close, Ghost Team had already moved on, leaving behind improvised traps, collapsed corridors, and confused security officers who couldn't understand how the humans kept disappearing. Meanwhile, Havoc Team was making their presence felt in a very different way. Lieutenant Reeves kicked in the door to Power Distribution Station 7 and immediately opened fire. His plasma rifle, taken from a dead warlord, burned through the station's control console in a spray of molten metal. Alarms shrieked, and emergency lights began flashing. "Charges placed," reported, slapping an explosive pack onto a massive power conduit. "This one controls life support for sections 90 through 120. "Don't blow it yet," Reeves said. "We want them scared, not dead, not yet." The warlords had expected many things when they detected intruders. They had expected a boarding action, a frontal assault, perhaps even suicide attacks. They had not expected humans to start systematically destroying their infrastructure without even attempting to fight their way to important targets. The humans didn't fight fair. They didn't stand and exchange fire in honorable combat. They hit hard, destroyed what they could reach, and disappeared before reinforcements arrived. They used the fortress's own systems against it, hacking doors to seal warlord security teams in dead-end corridors, venting atmosphere in empty sections to create the illusion of hull breaches, and turning automated turrets against their own forces. X watched his security feeds with growing anger and something he hadn't felt in decades: fear. Not fear of the humans themselves, but fear of what they represented. His forces outnumbered the intruders thousands to one. His warriors were better armed, better armored, and fighting on their own ground. Yet somehow, the humans were winning. They weren't fighting a military engagement. They were fighting a terror campaign, turning the Nexus Prime into a haunted house where death could come from any shadow. His soldiers were starting to hesitate, to check corners, to fire at movement that turned out to be nothing. The humans were making his people afraid, and fear was contagious. "Deploy the Void Reapers," X ordered. "If conventional security cannot handle this, we'll use the elite." The Void Reapers were the Warlords' answer to impossible situations. Warriors enhanced with cybernetic implants, trained in combat techniques from 100 conquered species, equipped with weapons that could kill in dimensions humans didn't even know existed. They were the unit that had broken the last major resistance movement in the Andromeda sector. 20 Reapers had defeated an army of 50,000. Surely they could handle 12 humans. Oracle Team had reached the central spire, the massive column that ran through the heart of the Nexus Prime. Somewhere above them, in the throne room at the spire's peak, the 7 warlord princes commanded their empire. Somewhere in the middle levels was the celestial beacon, the psychic amplifier that let them coordinate forces across the galaxy. Lieutenant Park pressed her hand against an access panel, and her suit's systems began interfacing with the alien technology. The Warlord computer systems were nothing like human designs, all quantum entanglement and neural interfaces, but Oracle Team had spent weeks learning to navigate them. "I'm in," Park said quietly, "reading the building's layout now. The beacon is 3 levels up in a shielded chamber. Security is heavy, very heavy." "Can we reach it?" asked the other member of Oracle Team. Not Admiral, just a soldier with an unfortunate coincidence of a name. "Maybe, but we'd have to go through about 30 security checkpoints, each one with automated weapons, energy barriers, and probably a small army of guards. So we'd die. Very quickly." Park pulled back from the interface, thinking. They needed time, and time was the one thing they didn't have. Every second they spent in this fortress, the warlords got closer to finding them. Every minute increased the probability of mission failure from almost certain to absolutely guaranteed. Unless they changed the parameters. "How much explosive do we have left?" He checked his pack. 2 charges. Why? "Because we're not going through the checkpoints. We're going around them." She pulled up a schematic on her display, showing the central spire structure. "See these power conduits? They run through every level, and they're big enough for a person to crawl through. The warlords don't guard them because they're shielded against energy weapons, and the radiation inside would kill most species in minutes." "Would kill humans too," pointed out. "Would kill unshielded humans. But our suits are rated for reactor work. We'd have maybe 20 minutes before the exposure becomes lethal, but that's 20 minutes more than the warlords think anyone has." Smiled grimly. "You're crazy." "I'm human, same thing." They found the access hatch to the primary power conduit 2 levels down, hidden behind a decorative wall panel. Park used her plasma cutter to slice through the panel, revealing a circular opening that glowed with fierce blue light. Heat washed over them even from 3 meters away. "This is a terrible idea," said, and then he crawled into the conduit first because that's what soldiers did. Park followed, pulling the hatch closed behind them. The conduit was hell. Energy crackled along the walls, and the temperature inside was hot enough to melt lead. Their suits' cooling systems kicked into overdrive, but Park could feel sweat running down her back within seconds. Her radiation counter began clicking, soft at first, then faster. They crawled upward, following the conduit as it twisted through the spire. Every meter was agony. The space was barely wide enough for their bodies, and the heat was suffocating. Park's hands burned even through her gloves, and breathing hurt. "Status," she gasped. "Still alive, still climbing, really regretting my life choices." They climbed for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, Park's display showed they had reached the right level. She used her plasma cutter on the conduit wall, carving a hole just large enough to squeeze through. They emerged into a dark chamber, tumbling onto the floor and gasping for cool air. Park checked her radiation counter. They'd absorbed enough to feel sick for a week, but nothing immediately lethal. Small victories. "Where are we?" asked. Park checked her display. The map showed they were adjacent to the celestial beacon's chamber, separated only by a single wall. She pressed her hand against it and felt something strange, a vibration that wasn't quite physical, like touching a living thing. On the other side of that wall was the device that controlled the Warlords' entire military, the weapon they'd used to conquer half the galaxy. And it was barely protected, because the Warlords had never considered that anyone would be crazy enough to crawl through a power conduit to reach it. "Plant the charges," Park said. "We're about to make some noise." Captain had reached the throne room. It hadn't been easy. She'd had to fight through 3 separate security cordons, dodge Void Reapers who moved so fast they were almost invisible, and climb up the outside of the central spire using magnetic grips while the fortress's defensive fields tried to shake her loose. But she was here, pressed against the ceiling of a cathedral-like chamber where the 7 warlord princes held their council. She could see them below, each one seated on a throne of energy, their 4 arms gesturing as they communicated in the psychic language humans couldn't hear. They were beautiful in an alien way. Their skin reflected light like prisms, casting rainbows across the chamber. They moved with grace despite their size, and their presence was commanding even from a distance. These were the beings who had conquered civilizations, who had never known defeat. Checked her weapons. 1 plasma rifle with a half-depleted charge, 2 explosive charges, a combat knife. Not nearly enough to kill 7 warlord princes surrounded by their guards, but maybe enough to scare them. Her comm crackled. "Oracle to all teams. Charges placed. We're ready to blow the celestial beacon on your signal." "Havoc team, charges placed on critical systems," Reeves reported. "Ready to make this fortress very uncomfortable." "Ghost team in position," Torres said, "though I think the Reapers are onto us. They're fast, Captain." Smiled. They'd actually done it. 12 humans had penetrated the most secure location in the galaxy, planted explosives on critical systems, and reached the throne room. Even if they died in the next 5 minutes, they'd proven something important. Humans could reach anywhere, could strike anyone. No target was too protected, no enemy too powerful. "All teams," said quietly. "On my mark, we show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. Oracle, when I give the signal, I don't want you to destroy the beacon. I want you to reprogram it. Can you do that?" There was a pause. "Reprogram it how?" "Reverse it. Make it broadcast fear instead of coordination. Turn their greatest weapon against them." That might work, but it would take time. At least 5 minutes, probably more. Then everyone else buys you that time. Havoc, start the light show. Ghost, make them chase shadows. We're going to tear this fortress apart from the inside." Dropped from the ceiling into the throne room, her plasma rifle already firing. The shots went wide deliberately, hitting the decorative pillars that lined the chamber. The pillars exploded in showers of crystal, and alarms began shrieking throughout the fortress. The 7 warlord princes turned as one, their multiple eyes focusing on the small human who had invaded their sanctum. For a moment, there was only silence, broken only by the echo of alarms. Then X's voice came over every speaker in the fortress. "Intruders located. Throne room compromised. All forces converge immediately." smiled at the princes. You wanted to know what humans are. We're the thing you never saw coming. We're the nightmare you didn't know you should fear. And then she ran, not away, but deeper into their throne room, drawing them and their guards into the chase. Behind her, throughout the Nexus Prime, explosions began to blossom as Havoc Team's charges detonated. The fortress shuddered, lights flickering, gravity fluctuating. In the Celestial Beacon's chamber, Park and began their work, fingers flying across alien interfaces, rewriting code that controlled the minds of millions. The battle for the Nexus Prime had truly begun, and the Warlords were learning a hard lesson. Superior technology and overwhelming numbers meant nothing if your enemy refused to fight the way you expected. They were learning that humans didn't fight to win. They fought to survive, and surviving meant doing whatever it took, no matter how impossible it seemed. The galaxy was about to change, because 12 humans had decided that walls could be breached, gods could be challenged, and nothing was truly unthinkable. They just had to live long enough to prove it.